The parched summer sun beat down on the dusty streets of Red Rock, Texas, when Penelope Moore's knees gave way beneath her, the child within her womb seemingly as heavy as the burdens she carried in her heart. She had been walking since dawn, the June heat of 1875 unforgiving and merciless to a woman 7 months pregnant with nowhere to call home. Weston O'Malley spotted her from across the street, her calico dress billowing briefly in the hot breeze before she crumpled like a marionette with cut strings. He was off his horse in an instant, boot heels kicking up dust as he sprinted toward the fallen woman. "Stand back, give her air." Weston commanded the small crowd of onlookers beginning to gather. His weathered hands moved with surprising gentleness as he cradled her head, shielding her from the relentless sun with his broad-shouldered shadow. Shrugging off his leather duster, he draped it over her, creating a small haven from prying eyes and scorching heat. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice low and steady as her eyelids fluttered. "You're safe now, madam." Penelope's eyes, the color of summer storm clouds, opened and focused slowly on the face above her son, bronzed and framed by dark hair streaked with strands of copper that caught the sunlight. A face lined with experience yet softened by concern. "My baby," she managed to whisper, hands instinctively moving to cradle her swollen belly. "Doc," Weston called out, scanning the faces in the crowd. Someone fetch Doc Palmer. Martha Holloway, the milliner whose shop front Penelope had collapsed before, pushed through the crowd. "Bring her inside, Mr. O'Malley. It's cooler and she needs water." With careful movements, Weston lifted Penelope, surprised by how light she felt despite her condition. Her breathing was shallow, her skin hot to the touch. Inside the millinery shop, Martha cleared a small chaise lounge of hat boxes while Weston gently laid Penelope down. "Water," Martha said, pressing a glass to Penelope's parched lips. "Slowly now, dear." "Thank you," Penelope murmured, embarrassment coloring her cheeks as awareness returned fully. "I'm so sorry for the trouble." "No trouble at all," Weston assured her, stepping back but reluctant to leave completely. There was something in this woman's eyes, a determination buried beneath exhaustion that stirred something in him. Doc Palmer arrived minutes later, his bag clutched in gnarled hands. "Everyone out," he ordered gruffly. "Except you, Martha, I'll need your help." Weston nodded, backing toward the door. "I'll be outside if you need anything, Doc." He paced the boardwalk for nearly an hour, turning down offers of whiskey from men who'd witnessed the event and now waited at the saloon across the street. Something kept him anchored to the spot, a responsibility he hadn't asked for but couldn't shake. When Doc Palmer finally emerged, wiping his spectacles on his vest, Weston was at his side instantly. "Heat exhaustion, dehydration, and plain exhaustion," the doctor diagnosed. "She's been walking for days by the looks of her feet. The baby seems all right, strong heartbeat, but she needs rest, food, and care." "Does she have family in town?" Weston asked. "Says she's headed to Fort Worth. Sister, they're expecting her." The doctor sighed heavily. "But she's in no condition to travel, not for at least a week, maybe more." Weston ran a hand through his hair, considering options. "The hotel, no money," Doc Palmer cut him off. "And before you suggest the church charity rooms, Reverend Phillips is away and his wife has her hands full with those orphans from the Anderson homestead fire." Weston sighed, knowing what needed to be done before he even consciously decided. "My sister's old room is sitting empty at my place. It's clean, quiet." Doc Palmer raised an eyebrow. "That's mighty generous, O'Malley, though folks might talk." "Let them," Weston replied with a shrug. "It's just until she's well enough to travel. Besides, Mrs. Carpenter comes by daily to help with cooking and cleaning. Her presence should satisfy the town gossips." Inside, Penelope had been helped to sit up, color returning slowly to her face. When Weston entered, her eyes met his with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. "Mr. O'Malley has offered you a place to recover," Doc Palmer explained. "His house is at the edge of town, quiet, comfortable." "I couldn't possibly," she began. "You can and you will," Martha interjected, patting her hand. If not for yourself, then for the child. Weston O'Malley is the most honorable man in Red Rock. You'll be safe there, and I'll visit daily myself." Penelope's eyes searched Weston's face for long moments before she nodded slightly. "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley. I don't know how I'll repay such kindness." "No need for repayment, just doing what's right." He cleared his throat, suddenly awkward under her scrutiny. "I'll bring the wagon around." The journey to Weston's modest ranch house on the outskirts of town was made in relative silence. Penelope, wrapped in blankets despite the heat, observed the man beside her through lowered lashes. His hands were strong on the reins, capable-looking, with calluses that spoke of hard work rather than gunplay, unlike many men who called themselves cowboys in these parts. "You have a beautiful home," she remarked as the two-story whitewashed house came into view, surrounded by cottonwood trees that provided blessed shade. "Been in the family since my father built it 20 years ago," he replied, a touch of pride warming his voice. "Nothing fancy, but it's solid." "You live here alone?" The question escaped before propriety could stop it, and she blushed. "Since my sister married and moved to Denver last year. My parents passed on during the fever outbreak of '67. I'm sorry for your loss," she said softly. "Mine left this world during the war." Confederate shells don't discriminate between soldiers and the civilians tending the wounded. Weston nodded solemnly, helping her down from the wagon with careful hands. War steals more than just those on the battlefield. Inside, the house was indeed simple but immaculately kept. Polished wood floors, practical furniture, and surprisingly delicate curtains that Penelope later learned had been his mother's handiwork. "Rebecca's room," he said, showing her a small but pleasant bedroom with a patchwork quilt on the bed and fresh wildflowers in a jar by the window. "Bathrooms down the hall. There's a pump inside, hot water if you stoke the kitchen stove." "This is more than generous," Penelope said, sinking gratefully onto the edge of the bed. "Mrs. Carpenter will be here in the morning. She helps around the place 3 days a week. I'll be out with the cattle most days, but you can ring the bell by the back door if you need anything urgent." That first night, lying in a stranger's bed, Penelope let silent tears flow freely for the first time in months. Tears for her dead husband, for the child who would never know its father, for the desperate flight from her father-in-law's cruel plans for her baby's future. When sleep finally claimed her, it was dreamless and deep. Morning brought the promised Mrs. Carpenter, a robust widow of 50 with capable hands and a no-nonsense attitude that somehow managed to be comforting rather than intimidating. "So you're the pregnant lady who collapsed at Martha's," she said, setting down a basket of fresh baked bread. Gave poor Weston quite a fright. "Don't think I've ever seen him move so fast." "He's been incredibly kind," Penelope replied, helping to shell peas despite Mrs. Carpenter's protests that she should rest. "Kindness runs deep in that man. His father was the same way." She paused, eyeing Penelope carefully. "Don't suppose you'd care to tell me what brings a young woman in your condition to be walking alone through Texas in June?" Penelope's hands stilled. "It's not a pretty story. Few true ones are, in my experience." So Penelope told her about Patrick Moore, the young lawyer she'd married in St. Louis, their plans for a family, his sudden death from pneumonia just months after learning of the pregnancy. About her father-in-law, Judge Thaddeus Moore, powerful and controlling, who had declared her unfit to raise the child alone. "He was going to take my baby the moment it was born," she whispered. "Had papers drawn up claiming I was unstable with grief. He even had a family-selected political allies with connections he could use. I couldn't let that happen." Mrs. Carpenter's weathered face softened. "So you ran?" "To my sister in Fort Worth. Hannah married a shopkeeper there. They've offered me a home protection." "Well," Mrs. Carpenter said after a moment, "you're welcome here until you're strong enough to complete that journey. Weston won't rush you." Days slipped into a gentle routine. Penelope regained her strength gradually, taking short walks in the shade of the cottonwoods, helping Mrs. Carpenter with light household tasks, and preparing simple meals for when Weston returned from the range. Evenings often found them on the porch, the summer heat easing as stars appeared overhead. They talked haltingly at first, then with growing ease. Weston spoke of cattle drives, of his dreams to expand his modest herd, of the sister he missed. Penelope shared stories of her childhood in Missouri, her love of books, her hopes for her child's future. "You know if it's a boy or girl?" he asked one evening, his voice careful, as if treading on sacred ground. "No," she smiled, hands cradling her belly. "Though my sister is convinced it's a girl, says I'm carrying high. My mother always said you could tell by the cravings. Sweet things for girls, sour for boys." Penelope laughed, the sound surprising them both with its warmth. "Then this child is thoroughly confused. One day it's pickles, the next it's maple candy." Weston smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face into something that made Penelope's heart stutter unexpectedly. A child of contradictions. The world needs more of those. As July bloomed hot and fierce, Penelope's strength returned fully. Her cheeks filled out, her eyes brightened, and the baby grew active, sometimes visibly shifting beneath her dresses in ways that fascinated Weston, though he tried not to stare. It was on a particularly stifling afternoon when Penelope, restless from confinement, ventured to the small creek that ran at the back of Weston's property. The cottonwoods provided deep shade, and she sat on a flat rock, her swollen feet dangling in the cool water, shoes and stockings abandoned on the bank. She didn't hear Weston approach until his shadow fell across her. "I'm sorry," she said, making to rise. "I should have asked before wandering." "No," he said quickly. "Please stay. It's your favorite spot too, I see." He settled on a neighboring rock, pulling off his boots and socks with a sigh of relief as his feet met the water. "Hard day?" she asked, noting the lines of fatigue around his eyes. "Mending fence in this heat isn't fit work for man or beast," he admitted. "But it won't fix itself." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the water's gentle flow until Penelope suddenly gasped, hands flying to her side. "What is it?" Weston was instantly alert, half rising. "Nothing alarming," she assured him, smiling. "The baby just has very strong opinions about which of my ribs are in the way." Without thinking, she reached for his hand, placing it where the child pushed against her. Weston went very still, his calloused palm warm against the taut fabric of her dress. Beneath it, the miraculous flutter of new life, his eyes, when they met hers, contained a depth of emotion that stole her breath. Reverence, wonder, and something more, something that made her pulse quicken and her cheeks flush with heat that had nothing to do with summer. "I've never felt anything like that," he whispered. Neither moved for long moments, his hand on her belly, their eyes locked in silent communication of things neither was ready to name. It was the distant rumble of thunder that finally broke the spell. Weston withdrew his hand slowly, reluctantly. "Storm coming," he said, voice gruff. "We should head back." They barely made it to the house before the skies opened. The summer storm was violent but brief, leaving behind cooled air and the sweet scent of rain-soaked earth. That evening, after a simple supper of rabbit stew and cornbread, they found themselves standing closer than usual as they washed and dried the dishes together. "I should be continuing to Fort Worth soon," Penelope said softly, the words painful but necessary. "I've imposed on your kindness far too long already." Weston's hands stilled on the plate he was drying. "You're not an imposition, Penelope." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it hung in the air between them, intimate and significant. "Nevertheless," she continued, forcing herself to be practical, "my sister is expecting me and the baby will come in less than 2 months. I need to be settled before then." "Of course," he said, his voice carefully neutral as he resumed drying. "I'll arrange for transport when you're ready." The unspoken hung heavily between them that night, each retiring to their separate rooms with thoughts too complex to untangle alone. Morning brought unexpected chaos. Weston had just saddled his horse when a rider appeared, his mount lathered and heaving. "Fire at the Bennett place," the man called out. "Lightning strike from last night's storm. They're trying to save what they can, but it's spreading toward the fields." "I'll be right there," Weston called back, turning to where Penelope stood on the porch, concern etching her features. "I have to go. The Bennetts have young children. Stay here where it's safe. I'll be back as soon as I can." Hours passed with no word. By midday, Penelope could see distant smoke on the horizon, dark and ominous. By evening, her worry had grown to outright fear. When hoofbeats finally approached well after dark, she rushed outside with a lantern, relief flooding through her until she saw it wasn't Weston but Thomas Fuller, the blacksmith's son. "Miss Moore," he called, dismounting quickly. "Mr. O'Malley's been hurt. Doc Palmer's with him at the Bennett place, but they need supplies from his house, bandages and the like. Mrs. Carpenter sent me to fetch them and to tell you not to worry." "Not worry," Penelope echoed, her heart racing. "How badly is he hurt? What happened?" Part of the barn collapsed. "He got the Bennett boy out, but a beam caught him across the back. Doc says it's not life-threatening, but he's lost blood and has some burns too." Penelope was already moving, gathering the medical supplies she knew Weston kept in a cabinet in the kitchen. "I'm coming with you." "Madam, in your condition, is less important than Mr. O'Malley's well-being," she finished firmly. "I was a nurse during the war, Mr. Fuller. I can help." The ride to the Bennett farm was tense and uncomfortable, but Penelope's determination didn't waver. The scene that greeted them was one of organized chaos, the smoldering remains of the barn, the house damaged but standing, neighbors still working to ensure no embers would reignite. Doc Palmer had set up a makeshift infirmary in a canvas tent. Inside, Weston lay on a cot, face pale beneath soot and blood, eyes closed in what Penelope prayed was merely sleep rather than unconsciousness. "Miss Moore," Doc Palmer frowned. "You shouldn't be here I have experience with wounds like these," she interrupted, already rolling up her sleeves. "And these are fresh supplies from Mr. O'Malley's home." The doctor studied her for a moment before nodding reluctantly. His back took the worst of it. "Burns along the right shoulder, a deep laceration across the left from hip to shoulder blade. I've stitched what I could, but infection is my biggest concern now." Penelope worked through the night alongside Doc Palmer, bathing Weston's wounds, applying salves, monitoring his fever as it rose and broke. When dawn lightened the sky, his eyes finally opened, focusing hazily on her face. "Penelope," he murmured, confusion evident, "you shouldn't be here." "Shush," she soothed, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "Save your strength, the boy," he asked, struggling to rise. "Evan Bennett is fine, thanks to you," she assured him, gently pressing him back. "Not even a scratch. Now lie still before you tear your stitches." For 3 days, Penelope refused to leave the makeshift infirmary, sleeping in brief snatches on a chair beside Weston's cot. On the 4th day, when it was clear the worst had passed, Doc Palmer declared Weston fit to return home, provided he had proper care there. "I can manage that," Penelope stated with quiet authority, brooking no argument from either man. The roles now reversed, Penelope found herself tending to Weston as he had to her. She changed his bandages, prepared broths and stews he could manage while still weak, read to him from his small collection of books during long afternoons when pain kept him from sleep, but exhaustion prevented activity. It was during one such afternoon, 2 weeks after the fire, that Weston finally asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him. "Why did you come that night? You risked yourself and your child to tend to me." Penelope set aside the book she'd been reading, Whitman's Leaves of Grass, and met his gaze steadily. "Because you risked yourself for a child who wasn't yours," she said simply. "And because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you." The admission hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. "I've been thinking," Weston said after a long moment, his voice careful, "about what happens when you're well enough to travel again." Penelope's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. "I suppose I should be making arrangements soon. August is almost upon us, or you could stay." The words came quickly, almost rushed. "Here, with me." She stared at him, scarcely breathing. "Weston." "I know it's sudden," he continued. "I know you have family waiting, plans made. But these weeks, Penelope, I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you. There's the baby to consider," she said softly. "Another man's child. A child I already love," he replied without hesitation. "From the first moment I felt it move beneath your heart." Tears welled in Penelope's eyes. "You can't know what you're asking. The responsibility, the gossip. I know exactly what I'm asking," he interrupted gently. "I'm asking for a life with you, both of you. I'm asking for the chance to be a father to a child who deserves one and a husband to a woman I've come to love more than I thought possible." "And if my father-in-law comes looking?" she asked, voicing her deepest fear. Weston reached for her hand, his grip firm despite his injuries. "Then he'll find a family, not a vulnerable woman alone. He'll find a husband with legal rights to protect his wife and child. He'll find a community that stands behind its own." Penelope's free hand moved to her belly, where the baby shifted as if in response to the tension in the room. "You would do that, take on a fight that isn't yours." "It would be mine," he said firmly. "Just as you would be mine and the child would be mine in all the ways that matter." The tears spilled over then, trickling down her cheeks. "I never expected to find love again, not after Patrick." "Love finds us when we need it most," Weston said, bringing her hand to his lips. "Not to replace what was lost, but to show us life continues." Their wedding was a simple affair at the end of August, performed by Reverend Phillips in the town church with most of Red Rock in attendance. Penelope wore a pale blue dress that Martha had altered to accommodate her now prominent belly, and Weston stood tall despite the lingering stiffness in his back. "I never thought I'd see the day Weston O'Malley took a bride, Mrs. Carpenter remarked to Doc Palmer as they watched the couple exchange vows. "Always figured him for a confirmed bachelor." "Takes the right woman," the doctor replied sagely, "and sometimes the right circumstances to recognize her." The letter to Penelope's sister in Fort Worth was met with an enthusiastic response, promises to visit after the baby's birth, and assurances that they would welcome the newlyweds should they ever decide to visit. As September brought cooler days, Weston threw himself into preparing the house for the coming child. A cradle, lovingly crafted from oak and lined with soft blankets. A rocking chair positioned perfectly by the bedroom window to catch the morning light. The baby arrived on a crisp October morning, announcing itself with a cry so robust that Doc Palmer laughed out loud. "Got a set of lungs on her, this one?" "Her?" Weston asked, looking up from where he held Penelope's exhausted but radiant face between his hands. "A daughter," Doc Palmer confirmed, handing the swaddled infant to the new mother. "Healthy as a horse, despite her early adventures." Penelope gazed down at the tiny face, perfect and pink, with a tuft of dark hair that could have come from either her first husband or her current one, a thought that brought not pain but a sense of rightness, of lives intertwined by love rather than divided by death. "What shall we name her?" Weston asked softly, one finger tracing the curve of the baby's cheek with reverence. "Hope," Penelope said without hesitation, "for that's what she is, what you gave me when I had none left." Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow by mid-November. Inside the whitewashed house, warmth prevailed, physical warmth from the well-stoked fire, and the deeper warmth of a family forged by choice rather than merely by blood. On Christmas Eve, as Hope slept peacefully in her cradle and snow fell softly outside the frosted windows, Weston pulled Penelope close beside the fire. "I have something for you," he said, pressing a small wooden box into her hands. Inside lay a delicate gold locket, simple but finely made. "It was my mother's," he explained as Penelope lifted it with gentle fingers. "Open it." Within were 2 miniature portraits, one of Weston, newly commissioned, and one that made Penelope's breath catch. "Patrick," she whispered, touching the tiny likeness of her first husband. "How did you?" "Your sister sent it. From that photograph you told me about." Weston's arms tightened around her. I thought, Hope should know both her fathers, the one who gave her life and the one who will share it. Tears spilled onto the locket as Penelope turned in his embrace. I don't deserve you, Weston O'Malley. Now that's where you're wrong, Penelope O'Malley, he corrected with a gentle smile. We deserve exactly what we found in each other, a second chance at happiness, unexpected but perfect in its own way. As midnight approached, they stood together at the window watching the snow transform their world into something clean and new, Hope sleeping against her father's chest, his heartbeat as familiar to her as the one that had sustained her before birth. When you collapsed in that street, Weston said softly, I had no idea I was running toward my future. And when you whispered that I was safe, Penelope replied, I didn't understand how true those words would become. Outside, the year drew to its close. Inside, a family created from tragedy, chance, and choice embraced their future, secure in the knowledge that sometimes the greatest acts of courage are not those performed in the heat of danger, but in the quiet decision to open one's heart to love, whatever form it might take. In the years that followed, the O'Malley ranch prospered and grew, as did the family itself. Hope was joined by a brother 2 years later, then twin sisters after that. Penelope's sister relocated to Red Rock after her husband's passing, bringing with her skills as a seamstress that soon made her an indispensable part of the community. Judge Thaddeus Moore did indeed come looking eventually, arriving in Red Rock with legal papers and threats. He departed with neither his grandchild nor his dignity, having encountered not just Weston's quiet determination, but the united front of an entire town that protected its own. And on summer evenings, long after the events that brought them together, Weston and Penelope could still be found on their porch, watching their children play beneath the cottonwoods, hands entwined, hearts full with the knowledge that safety, in its truest form, is found not in places, but in people, in the courage to collapse and the strength to catch, in whispered promises kept through all the seasons of a shared life.